audio good?
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to introduce Pete Brown from Microsoft. We've been in contact for a while and working with the Juice team at integrating some of the advancements that Pete and his team have been working on. And so it's a pleasure to welcome you for the first time here after many years of discussions. So thank you, and I would you please give him a round of applause.
Thanks. So thank you very much. Is the mic working, or yes, no? Are we good? All right, great, thanks. That's what I was looking for. So I am very excited to be here. This is the first time that I've been at the ADC, so this is really kind of a fun thing for me. Like John Baptiste mentioned, that we have worked with Rolly and the Juice team and stuff in the past to try to incorporate some of the features that we're putting into Windows 10, right? Some of the things that I want to talk to you about here today are things that, for those of you who have been developing for Windows 10 for a while, some of it's going to be kind of a review of things that we've added in. For those of you who maybe develop primarily for iOS or for Mac or for Windows 7, some of these features here are going to be brand new. So what I really wanted to do here with you all is just kind of bring you up to speed on some of the things that we've brought into Windows 10 that I think, I personally think you should be using, but I'm hoping that you'll use in your applications and stuff going forward. So a little background on myself here. I am a synthesizer freak, I guess, is how you could put it. You could tell the priorities for my house and my basement. I've decided synthesizers are more important than walls at this point, so it's something I really have a lot of fun doing. I also do a lot of work with just computer audio and things just on my own, and I am starting to get into Juice because now it supports some of the features I like, so it's been a fun trip there. So here just oh, and by the way, for questions, I'm leaving some time here at the end, so any questions that you have about the stuff that we're doing here or anything else, feel free to ask here at the end of the session. So here are 4 big features that are audio specific that I think are super interesting that we've added into Windows 10. So first of all, and photos are allowed and stuff, so feel free to take pictures of these things, anything that you want to remember. Thunderbolt 3 support we added into the operating system a few versions back, and this is something we're starting to see the hardware device vendors putting out devices now, like Universal Audio and some others have put out Thunderbolt 3 devices. We officially in Windows 10 support Thunderbolt 3 for audio. There are folks that are using Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2 adapters to be able to use some of the older devices, and most of those are working out as well. Most of the manufacturers that are creating PC motherboards and whatnot are using the add-on card approach. So you'll buy like an Asus or a Gigabyte or something like that motherboard, and then they'll have a Thunderbolt header on it that supports Thunderbolt 3 and an add-on card that they'll sell you that has a Thunderbolt 3 port on that. We're also seeing a number of these in, especially in gaming-oriented PC laptops, where they're being used for external video cards and whatnot. As long as it has Thunderbolt 3 support, it also supports Thunderbolt 3 audio, okay? Another thing that we've put in that is news to, I think, a lot of folks is we finally put in a USB audio class 2 driver after about 1 billion years of working on this. So in box, we have a regular USB audio 2 class driver. Now that is primarily for consumer scenarios. So for those of you who are doing, again, USB audio hardware, most of that hardware, you're still probably going to want to use ASIO drivers and whatnot for that. But if you're just doing, standard USB microphones or normal playback or even like 7.1 type playback or something like that, you can use our inbox driver. It gets detected automatically. You don't have to add anything else on there. One of the things I've been a big proponent for and something I'm super excited about is Bluetooth MIDI. So Bluetooth MIDI we've had in the box for a couple of versions now. Unfortunately, we had some bugs, right? So there were some issues that folks that were, especially on the Juice team working on here for a bit, ran into, where we had an issue with, not to show you everything here, but we had an issue with, like, say, short sysx messages. If they were under, I think it was like 19 bytes or something, they weren't transferring through. We fixed those issues. I'm not going to say we fixed all the issues, but as far as I know, we fixed all the issues. I'm going to trust you all to find the other ones that we haven't fixed yet. We have Bluetooth MIDI support in the 1809 version of Windows. That is actually going out now, so that any of you who are using this stuff or targeting applications to support Bluetooth MIDI or anything will be able to use that with this most current release of Windows 10. And then finally, this is something that I don't believe is currently supported in Juice, but is supported in Windows 10 in general. We have for the onboard audio devices for PCs like Surfaces and gaming laptops and whatnot that are out there, we have low latency audio support for those on-chip audio devices, and that's using our Wasapi interface. And if you use iAudio Client 2, I believe it is, there's an interface there that lets you select the, the size of the buffers as well as disable certain things. So you no longer have to use, exclusive mode for getting the best audio performance in Wasapi if you're using inbox devices. And we're pretty competitive there. It's in the very low tens of milliseconds for round trip, and we tried to be competitive with other platforms on that. Okay, let's go down here. Now, the other thing I'd mention I'm really excited about is there are two key features that just came out in the latest version of Juice. One is support for Bluetooth MIDI on Windows 10. So if you're running Windows 10 1809 or the future versions we'll have after that, you can now use Bluetooth MIDI devices directly from Juice. All right. The other thing that they've added in, and Tom on the development team was telling me about this, is support for Windows 10 high DPI mode. So any of you who've had to do anything with DPI modes in Windows 10 know that we've tried really hard to make it as reasonable as possible, but given all the different ways that applications can render and all the different types of monitors that are supported and whatnot, it can be a bit of a challenge to make that work correctly. So luckily Juice has that built in, and it's the per monitor, the latest version of the per monitor support we have there. So your Juice applications compiled against this should work correctly when you have, say, a laptop that's high DPI and then a normal like 1920 by 1080 screen external to that, and you drag windows back and forth between them. Okay, so let me give you just a quick example or quick demo of the Bluetooth MIDI part. So this is, you've probably all seen this before, right? The demo runner application in Juice. And so if I just run this normally, and if I go to Browse Demos, if I go to Audio, and if I go to the MIDI demo, you'll see that the only MIDI device on this PC right now is the internal synthesizer. Okay. Now, if I go into this special section of code here in the configuration, and I paste in, by the way, we have a clipboard manager in Windows 10 now as well, if you haven't noticed that. And it also synchronizes across all your devices if you want it to, right? So I'm going to paste in the define WinRT MIDI. I'm going to compile that. And I don't sing or dance, so we're just going to watch this wonderful compile complete as it goes through. One at a time. All right, it's compiling. This is our lives, right? Compiling. And this is a small project. You should try compiling Windows. All right. And just about there, and it'll start in a second. So while that's doing that, I have just a standard Bluetooth MIDI keyboard controller here, right? So it's a Korg Nano key, which is missing one of the keys. I seem to have lost it on the plane. So it happens when you play stuff on the plane. Now, because I've put that definition in there, right, it's now switched over from kind of our legacy MIDI stack to our current Windows 10 MIDI stack. If I go over here to Browse Demos, go to Audio, go to MIDI Demo. If I close this, you'll see that now our Bluetooth MIDI devices are showing up. So I can select that one. Oops. Try it again. There we go. And I can say the output here. And if the demo gods are all, no, it's going to choke on me here. Trust me, this usually works when it's not up on the stage. Let's try this again. Yeah, right. I probably need to restart the application. Now, there are some things that you need to understand about how the Bluetooth MIDI stuff here is working, and Tom's done a good job of describing those up on the Juice forums that explain different aspects of that. One is the way that you detect that the device is or is not present is actually a little tricky, because this is Bluetooth low energy, so technically the device is always present once it's been paired with the PC. Like we're not going out and actually checking until you try to acquire the port and try to open the port. Once you try to open the port, I think Juice is gonna give you back an error or give you a timeout or something if the device is not actually there. And I think that was what was happening there a second ago. So that's a big thing to consider with Juice. And the other thing is just that the way that you pair these devices is the way that you pair any other Bluetooth device in Windows. It just shows up as a standard Bluetooth MIDI device. And I know many of you have asked before, how do I know if something is a Bluetooth MIDI device versus a USB MIDI device? And we do have identifiers that are inside the device IDs that can tell you if it's Bluetooth or not. And you'll actually see the word Bluetooth in there, as well as on the device name itself, it'll say Bluetooth MIDI in, Bluetooth MIDI out, etc. So again, a huge thanks to the folks on the Juice team there. Here, I was going to try one more time just while that's going. A huge thanks to the folks like Tom on the Juice team that have gone through and made that work. If this doesn't work now, it'll work later, I guarantee it. So, yeah, it's having a little problem there with this device. Battery might actually be getting pretty low. Yeah, okay. There. All right. Trust me, if you want to see a demo of that working later, I'm more than happy to show you one once it's off the stage. All right. So both of those, again, in the latest version of Juice, and thanks to that team. Another thing that is probably new to most folks here is we now accept Win32 apps in the Windows Store, right? A lot of times when we've talked about the Windows Store in Windows 10, it's always been about writing UWP applications, and most of you have told me quite loudly that you don't want to rewrite your applications as UWP applications. I can't imagine why. But now we do support Win32 applications in the store. So those of you who are building desktop applications, building Juice applications, or anything like that, talk to me if you want to get it into the store. Examples of a few that we've put in lately is iTunes, of course, is a Win32 application that's in the store, as well as something like the Arduino IDE, and then plenty of others. There are some packaging requirements for that, and again, I'm more than happy to help you out with that if you want to put those in the store, okay? And you might wonder, why would you put them in the store? Why would I bother doing that? At the same time here, we're announcing a new revenue model for the store. So it's always been the 70-30 model, very much like other stores. So what we're doing here in the store now is if a user goes in and finds the application in the store, right, through something like you didn't send them there, they actually just found it through some marketing information that we put out, or they browsed for it or whatever, you'll get 85% of the revenue for that particular sale. If you send them to the store yourself, right, we didn't do a marketing campaign for it, didn't do anything like that, right? If you send them to the store yourself, you get 95% of the revenue for that, and we have 5% that we use just for the hosting costs and everything else related to having things in the store. This doesn't apply to games. This is for applications only, but it is something to help entice more of these applications to come into the store, and I think give you a fairer break of or fairer cut of the revenue. Now, this is something that'll be coming soon. It's not in the store, it's not available right now, but you're going to see a fair bit of this here over the coming months. And if you want to use this, if you have an application that, Win32 or UWP that you want to get into the store, just contact me. It's pete.brown@microsoft.com, and I can help make sure that you get set up to use this. Another thing that I think is unknown to a lot of folks here potentially is that we have in Windows 10 now built-in evaluation of machine learning models. Right? I know a lot of application developers are starting to incorporate machine learning models and evaluation of that in their applications. And now, as of the 1809 release, we had a preview version of it in previous releases. As of the 1809 release, you can now evaluate the Onyx models directly inside Windows 10, inside your applications. They can be Win32, UWP, whatever. We don't care about that. You'll still train your models externally through whatever source, or whatever way you've been training your models over the past. But now if you have them in Onyx format, you can evaluate them for free for as often as you want directly on Windows. And that will make it, it's a super low latency way for you to execute on some of these models and to be able to make decisions in your applications. And again, these APIs are available to any type of application that works on Windows. Another thing that we've made a lot of investments in Windows 10, which you may not think has a huge impact to audio developers, it should have a huge impact to every type of developer, is accessibility, right? So we have a lot more built-in accessibility tools and APIs than we've had before. There's a lot of stuff that can happen automatically so that like when you're testing your applications, I encourage you to go into the settings application and look under the accessibility tab and see what your application looks like in, say, high contrast mode or in some of the different types of modes that are targeted for people who see colors differently than the rest of us. There's also, starting with 1809, built-in support for eye tracking devices. So I know both of my kids have Tobii eye tracking built into their gaming laptops, and this is something that you're going to see built into more and more laptops over time. And these are really important for folks that, again, are somehow impaired, where they're just using their eyes to target everything in Windows. They're not using, say, like a mouse or a keyboard. They're just looking at different parts of the screen. So that's now built into the operating system. And then it looks basically like a mouse to your application, so you don't have to do anything special there. However, if you do want to have special functionality that is lit up by these eye tracking devices, we have APIs that you can call that you can interface with those devices directly inside your applications. Another thing that's I think super interesting here is like, how many of you have iOS or Android devices, right? Pretty much everybody in the room here, right? What we've decided to do in Windows is to make it so that these devices work really well with Windows, and you get an overall experience that's better as a result of that. So we're doing things, and we're starting a lot of this with Android because, frankly, the APIs are easier to access in Android devices than they are in iOS at the moment. So we're doing things like, you can answer your text messages from your PC without having to get your Android device out of your pocket, right? So we have a lot of that type of integration. You can browse the photos that are on your device directly and drag and drop them in between presentations and documents and stuff without having to email them back to yourself or do any of that kind of crazy stuff. And we're doing our best to support, like I said, both Android and iOS on all of these. The other thing is, you as application developers have access to these same APIs where you can, say, start something on your phone. Say you have an application that's creating music and you want to start jamming on the train or something like that. Start something on the phone and then synchronize that with the PC, so if there is an equivalent application on the PC, you can pick up where you left off on the phone. And these are things, again, all the APIs there are available. The main one that you want to look at is something called Project Roam, which you'll see in our developer documentation. And then just in general, the Microsoft Graph, which is the backend that we use to enable this transfer of information as synchronization and whatnot. How many of you here use Visual Studio as developers? Okay, just about everybody. All right. How many of you use Visual Studio Code? A few folks. All right. The Visual Studio Code is primarily targeted to web developers, but it's getting more and more capable of different types of application development. For example, I run an Ubuntu Minecraft server at my house, right? And I build add-ins for the Minecraft server, and I can do those all inside Visual Studio Code because there's a Java toolchain for that. And I feel a little ill, doing the Java stuff, but that's okay. There's also C++ toolchains. You can do GCC work using Visual Studio Code, and then, of course, .NET and all the other types of languages and stuff that we support. I overheard a conversation earlier talking about CMake. And so, yes, we've had Visual Studio support for CMake for some time. As long as you have the CMake executable on your PC, you're able to open CMake projects and build the index and cache and all that kind of stuff from Visual Studio so that you can compile using that. All right. How many of you use Linux? Okay, cool. How many of you knew about the Windows subsystem for Linux? A few folks. Great, great, great. So for a while now, we've had built-in support for for Linux on Windows. And this is an implementation of the Linux syscalls natively on top of Windows. It's not something running in a virtual machine. It's not any kind of sandbox environment. It is the ability to run pretty much any Linux distro directly on top of Windows 10. And it has access to the file system. It has access to all the same things that you would want that to be able to use. We're working on performance more. I think you'll find that the performance on it has gotten better with each release as we kind of move things lower and lower, and also optimize that work. There's even in the store, if you're interested in this, there is an X server for Windows as an application, so you can run kind of GUI applications on the PC directly integrated with all your other applications. It's not hardware accelerated though, so really we personally at Windows are targeting command line applications, but other folks are expanding upon that to make it possible to run like XFCE and some of the basic window managers and stuff that don't rely on hardware acceleration. Now, if you haven't seen this, let me just show you a quick look here. So if I go to a folder here, let's go to Documents folder. If you shift and right click in the folder, I can say Open Linux Shell here, right? And this is, I'm running Ubuntu here for the version of Linux on this machine, but you can do all the same things that you would normally expect to be able to do in Linux. I can actually, so let's say, I'm a wimp on Linux, so I use nano as the editor, right? So I say nano test.txt, and I say line 1, line 2, 3, line 4. Get out of that. There's also integration with your Windows tools, so I can say notepad.exe test.txt. Usually. Oh, did I? No. Oh, yeah. EX. It's not the file system. It's the. There we go. All right. So here's Notepad that's opening that file that I created in Linux. Notice something else interesting with this. So the team that I'm on actually owns a lot of the first-party apps like this, but Notepad now recognizes Unix and Linux. I love cheap applause. That's awesome. All right. So we actually support all three, right? So we do Mac line endings, we do Linux line endings, and we also do regular Windows line endings. Okay, so again, this gives you kind of all the integration that you'd want with your file system. You see I'm just at Mount C user ppre documents. The main intent behind this is if you're comfortable, you have like a Linux compile chain, or you have like scripts that you need to use as part of your development process, we want to make sure that you can run those still on Windows, and also integrate and call out to other applications on Windows if that helps make sure your compile process easier. That's our primary target environment. This is not replacing the command line shell, right? But this is just another way for you to use Windows. All right, let's get back over. Oops. Oh, by the way, you get new distros just through the store. So like I said, I use Ubuntu. It's all free through the store. Once it's installed on your PC, if you want to update it, you just use the normal update process and update methods that you have inside there. Again, as I mentioned before, not hardware accelerated. So if you're doing, say, like machine learning stuff inside Ubuntu, you don't have access to like all the GPU stuff in there at this point in time. If that's interesting to you, send us feedback about that and what you would like to see there. So one of the last things I do want to mention is how to provide feedback to us. I get a lot of emails with feedback from different folks asking for features or giving us bug reports and whatnot. They go a lot further if we have feedback items in our system that back those, right? So what happens is when somebody goes into our feedback application and adds some feedback in there or votes up feedback or something, this goes directly into a triage system that we have at Microsoft that is part of our Visual Studio environment that we can look at, and we can look at those bugs and decide if that bug or if that feature or something gets promoted up and sent over to the rest of the work system, right? So when you start them here, it makes it so much easier for me to make a case to the rest of the development team for adding this feature or adding a bug or something, because I always like to refer back to the customer feedback. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and open up the floor for questions. And if you have anything that you want to learn more about on Windows, please do go to dev.windows.com, and that's really the starting point for everything. Okay, thank you. We have a couple minutes for questions. Yes.
Oh, g'day.
Oh, cool.
G'day.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I've, as a test anyway, converted my app to a UWP app,
Yes.
which is the modern style of Windows app which has been promoted. These are heavily sandboxed.
Yes.
What's the story for running, say, VST plugins from such a app?
Right. And that's one of the reasons why UWP in this community hasn't taken off well, because one, you can't expose a plugin out of your application because the directory location is obfuscated. And second, you can't dynamically load code, whether it's a DLL or anything. You can't go and just scan a directory and dynamically load something there, which is why we've, and it's not just this industry, it's also, say, companies like Photoshop or other places where they do plugins. That's why we're allowing Win32 apps into the store. We have a slightly different opt-in sandbox for those, where we can have different sections of the sandbox kind of compartmentalized.
Yeah, my Win32 app is in the store already, yeah.
Yeah, great, Great, yeah. So UWP right now does not have any plans for plugins that are of the speed and accessibility that we would need to do something like a VST. Other questions?
Other questions? Paul?
Hey,
Yes.
with the store, do you have the same limitation as the Apple Store, where with regards to in-app purchases and subscriptions? So, for example, on the Apple Store, we can't provide a subscription provided by our website. It has to be through the Apple system. Does the same apply to the Windows Store?
You know, it did originally. I'm trying to think now what we've got there, if it would not. I think email me that, because I know a lot of those we do kind of case by case, just like answering those questions. So email me at pete.brown with a specific example, and I know I can get you an answer. Thanks. Yes.
About the accessibility, is it also supported in JUICE to use Windows 10 accessibility, like you said, for the Bluetooth stack?
So so accessibility is, a lot of those are just standard in the operating system. So I could go and have a Toby bar that I put on my PC and control a JUICE application with that, right? And not have to do anything special there. Anything above and beyond that, I think, is kind of out of the scope of what JUICE would have in the box, but could very simply be added on in your application by calling the appropriate APIs in Windows. Okay.
Thanks.
Maybe to answer your question from the JUICE perspective, we don't have at the moment a cross-platform solution for accessibility, because each operating system has very different implementation, and for us to support both is difficult for now. So we have one question here and then.
Hello.
Yes.
A couple of fast questions. When you say that USB audio is only available for consumer-grade application,
Yes.
I think that's for latency.
Yeah, it's about the latency there. We haven't done any tuning for USB devices for latency with our inbox class 2 driver.
And is there a time frame where a low latency USB audio, class compliant USB audio driver is going to be released?
So a class compliant USB audio driver with lower latency, I think you're asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a time frame for that yet. In fact, we're still finding out that a lot of folks would rather use ASIO in those cases. And so again, this comes down to sufficient feedback from folks that yes, we want to be able to have low latency WAP-y interface to these devices, because we don't like writing drivers and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You showed how from the bash you could actually invoke Notepad. Notepad, is it also possible to do the same from the CMD to launch Unix executables?
Yeah, so there's actually a command line where you can just use, like from the regular Windows command line, it's like WSL and then the rest of the statement that you want to do. So if you want to execute a particular bash script or something like that.
So even if it doesn't have any XC executable, it will recognize it as...
Yeah, if it's something that can be expressed in the Linux bash shell, then in a single line, then you can run that from the command line as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One last question.
Other questions?
All right.
Cool,
So
well,
thank you again.
thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing your JUICE applications and other applications that are using these new features. And again, if you have any questions at all, it's pete.brown@microsoft.com. And if I don't answer right away because I'm traveling this week, feel free to ping me over and over again until I get you the answer that you'd like. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We have half an hour break now. The next session in this room is going to be a panel on diversity. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thanks for, yeah, that's good. Sure.